Hello, this is Fritz-Ay says, and welcome back to One Last Night. It's been a while, quite a while, since I've done another recording, and, yeah, I've been so very busy going to MFF, moving, and then just being sick pretty much for like a whole month. Oh my gosh, but hey, I'm glad you guys are enjoying the videos, and yeah, I'm ready to get back into it. The last we left off with the group was they just got abducted by bandits as soon as they reached Haven. So let's see where this goes. Bandits. Arc 2. Captured. It was nice to have a cloudless sky like the one tonight, giving a view of the stars that littered the void above the world. Without the light pollution of the city from before, things were clear enough that you no longer needed to travel far outside town just to get a glimpse of it. The stars shone alongside the moon, illuminating the ruined cityscape that rested on the earth below. It was almost like resting in a blanket fort, with a knitted one draped across the ceiling. At least that was the comparison the young boy made as he stared up into it. He missed the days where he could make one at home. He was only 8 when it all happened, the world coming to an end. He wasn't even fully sure that it had happened, just that things were different than before. No more accompanying his parents to the store, getting to sit in the cart and see all the items lining the shelves. No more going to school to see his friends and learning an abundance of new and exciting things. He was just getting used to the multiplication, too. No more of any of what he'd grown used to in those few years he'd spent alive. Eli, sweetheart, don't stray too far from the camp, okay? You know how dangerous it gets out there at night. Well, aside from his parents. I won't, Mum. Promise. Eli hoped the words were enough to reassure her as he sat cross-legged near the edge of the camp, the heat of the fire at his back. He used a finger and traced the imaginary lines connecting the stars, thinking about the constellations his parents had taught him. He smiled at how good he was at finding them, spending each night scouring the sky for their distant whereabouts. The smile only widened as he placed his favorite by far. Osiris! Though he had the story memorized by heart, he always asked his father to tell it to him before bed each night. He could even recall the tale in his voice. A long time ago, there once lived a man named Osiris. He came from humble beginnings, with not much to his name except a decrepit little house. Yet he was happy, for he had a wonderful wife and son whom he loved from the bottom of his heart. He would do anything to keep them safe. Osiris developed a kind and caring nature. He helped those in need in his community, especially when the greedy king's soldiers came knocking. One day, a wounded man appeared at his doorstep in need of aid. Unable to turn away the man in need, he brought him in and tended his injuries. The man was a rebel who was attempting to usurp the king and create a fair kingdom for all, one where people like he and Osiris would no longer suffer under his rule. Unfortunately, a soldier had seen the man enter, and it wasn't long until reinforcements returned with him. Osiris tried to tell them it was a misunderstanding, but the soldiers refused to listen to him. They burnt his house to the ground and took his wife and son away. The rebels in Osiris were sent to the underworld. their ties to the mortal realm severed. Instead of accepting his fate, however, he pitched a deal to the gods. His fate had been unfair and out of his control, as was the case for most in life. Rather than containing him to the afterlife, he would be allowed to become a hero in his own right. Like the gods themselves, all a person in need would have to do was utter his name to receive his divine aid. It was a desperate bid, one that both he and the gods could sense was futile. What reason did they have to take worship away from themselves? The gods all laughed at Osiris, except for one. The goddess of the night extended a hand towards him and offered a new deal. He would be allowed to return to the realm of the living once per century, where he would receive divine gifts in order to help people. This, however, would come at a cost. He must give up any distinguishable physical features, as such making him unidentifiable. Osiris immediately accepted the deal, and was promptly returned to the mortal plane. Meanwhile, the goddess of the night engraved his image in the sky as a reminder of their accord. Ever since, there had been reports of a cloaked figure spanning ages, but not a single one could recall him having a face. So if you ever find yourself in urgent need, find Osiris in the stars and bid him your request. If you're lucky enough, he just might answer. Eli stifled a yawn as he finished recounting the tale in his head. Combined with the journey today, he was exhausted. As he finished tracing the constellation, he was surprised to find a star that didn't belong there. He traced it again to be sure, and this time the star had moved. Focusing on the light, he realized it hadn't been a star at all. In fact, it looked a lot like a butterfly. A glowing butterfly. Eli had never heard of butterflies being able to glow before, and it seemed to be approaching him. He stuck a finger out, letting it land on it as he watched in awe. This had to be one of the coolest things he'd seen in ages. It was much better than those monsters he and his parents had to flee from days prior. A soft breeze blew at him, and the butterfly took off, beginning to fly away. He watched it go, not wanting to let it leave. Behind him, he could hear the soft arguing of his parents. They've been doing this a lot lately. Eli glanced between the butterfly and his parents, unsure of what to do. He had always been a good boy, listening to everything they said, following their rules. He knew sometimes his parents broke their own rules too, and they always asked him not to tell anyone. They said sometimes they just had to indulge. By that logic, shouldn't he be allowed to indulge once in a while too? With a final look back at his parents, Eli quietly slipped into the night after this butterfly. It was a bit hard to see at first, as his eyes started to adjust to the darkness while he followed the bug into the distance. He wouldn't stray too far, though, since it meant that he could sneak back without them knowing he was ever gone. Wait up! The butterfly kept drifting farther and farther away as Eli desperately tried to catch up to it. He was getting a little uncomfortable with just how far he was away from the camp. Eli stared ahead, though. A soft light seemed to be coming from over a hill of rubble. He wondered what it could be as the butterfly coasted over it, calling to his curiosity. As he reached its crest, the boy's awe only grew at the sight before him. An entire swarm of glowing butterflies were dancing in the air together. He marveled at the sight, drawn in by the lure of something new and beautiful. It demanded all his attention. Eli stood memorized as the insects swirled together in a maelstrom of light. It was because of this that Eli failed to notice the man in the center of it all at first. The insects fluttered around the rabbit, obscuring a proper view of him. After a moment, the boy caught sight of him. 2 tan ears protruded above the head, while his bare torso showcased his white fur decorated with small brown spots. Eli stood there, confused by all this. Where was the man's shirt? Was he okay? Why did the butterflies like him so much? Maybe if he asked, the strange man would answer. He hesitated, though, remembering the message of being careful around strangers. Except wasn't he indulging himself tonight? Surely a question wouldn't hurt. Excuse me, sir, who are... Eli! Eli flinched at the sound of his father calling his name from behind. He was walking up to the pile of rubber where the boy stood with his anger in his eyes. He knew he was in trouble now.
I thought we made it clear. No wandering off alone.
I'm sorry, Dad, but...
No buts. I thought you knew better.
I do, Dad. I promise. I just wanted to indulge like you and Mom do. Eli could see the heat rush to his father's cheeks. Whether it was from embarrassment or anger, he wasn't sure. Eli took the opportunity to cut in before his dad could say anything else. I just wanted to see the butterflies. He gestured to his left with sadness in his voice, which only confused his father.
Butterflies.
The two turned in unison to where the swarm of insects resided, glowing as brightly as the stars above. Only now, the pair had a clear view of the man standing with them. Only it wasn't a man at all. From the upper jaw to the base of his ears, all the flesh and fur had sloughed off, leaving a darker, hardened skull behind. Blood was spattered across its body, dripping from the eye sockets and the base of its two elongated tusks. Most eerily, however, was the hole in its throat, a source of glowing butterflies. The insects poured out into a shiny blue swarm, beginning to surround the figure once more. Eli knew this had been another one of those monsters, another fated.
Run.
Eli shook himself from his daze, looking up to his father in fear.
Run now! Back to your mother!
But he was frozen, not wanting to leave his dad behind.
Go!
That was the final push he needed, hearing the terror and concern of his father's voice replacing the earlier anger, sending him sprinting away. Eli focused as best as he could on his footsteps, desperately trying to get back to the camp. His mother could help them. She always knew what to do. He stumbled as he ran when he heard a scream of agony from behind, turning to see the swarm overtaking where his father stood. He quickly set his sights back ahead, pushing out the brief imagery of what looked like his father being eaten alive. Butterflies didn't eat meat, did they? Eli tripped when he reached the camp and straightened to his mother's arms, beginning to bawl his eyes out at the embrace. Eli, baby, what's going on? What happened? Where's your father? Without looking, the boy pointed behind him towards where he'd last seen them. Help him! The butterflies, I'm sorry! Looking where her son had pointed, she saw the swarm of butterflies at the crest of the hill with a figure standing amongst them. In its paw was a limp, lifeless corpse. Eli's mom quickly knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her son. It's okay, sweetheart. You're forgiven. Now Mommy needs you to do her a favor, okay? The boy nodded as the swarm glanced in their direction. I need you to grab your bag and run. What? It'll be okay, I promise. Mommy and Daddy love you very dearly, and we'll see you soon, alright? Eli nodded and gave his mother one last hug. I love you too. The glowing butterflies begin their advance once more. Now go, and whatever you do, don't look back! The boy ran past his mother, grabbing his small bag as he made a break for it. He had to listen this time. Things would be alright. Wouldn't they? Eli ran as fast as his short legs could carry him, off into the never-ending night. He stumbled frequently, tears clouding his vision at what had just happened. If only he'd listened. If only he'd never broken the rules. If only there was more he could do to help. All he could do now was run. He didn't stop when he had heard the shrill scream echo from behind, wanting to look back but knowing it was better if he listened. Instead, he kept moving forward as best he could, but he knew the creature was beginning to close in on him. Eli ran into an open area, what looked like the remains of a roundabout. He had to keep moving. Suddenly, the boy tripped, his foot failing to clear a piece of jutting cement, sending him sprawling forward onto the hard ground. His pack shot out of his hands as the pebbles scraped at his exposed limbs. Eli let out a cry of pain as he began to sob more furiously. He sat up, gaze focused on the way he came. The butterflies were closing in, the writhing mass of insects preparing to do to him what they did to his parents. Slowly, stalking behind them was the rabbit, more glowing vermin pouring from the hole in his throat. Was this his end? Wasn't he too young to be brought to the underworld? An idea struck him. He turned his gaze upwards towards the open sky as he searched for the consolation of his hero. With his last bit of courage he could muster, he whispered the words he'd used so many times in the past, but finally for a reason more serious than a petty want. Please, Osiris, help me! But there was no answer. The butterflies began to close in on their prey, moving swiftly as their wings cut through the night. Still, he had to try once more, louder this time. Osiris! Help me! The swarm took to the skies above him, blocking out his view of the stars. This was it. His last bid failed. Eli could do nothing but stare up in horror, the tears refusing to even fall. Get down! The voice echoed in his head, and Eli curled in on himself on command. He had to trust his mother. As he prepared to feel the battering of insects against his skin, instead he felt a surge of heat from overhead as an orange light flashed at his closed eyes. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air as Eli felt a few of their bodies hit him on their way down. When the heat stopped, Eli gingerly sat up and opened his eyes. What happened? What was going on? The dead bodies of the swarm littered the ground around him.
Hey there, you alright?
The boy looked towards the voice, shocked at seeing the source originated from that of a cloaked figure. Osiris had answered his call. The man looked down at Eli, stopping as his mind processed what he was seeing.
Shit, you're just a child. Shoot. I probably shouldn't swear in front of you, right?
The boy shook his head as the two stared at each other, both surprised to see each other for different reasons, until a guttural shriek brought them back to the present. They simultaneously turned to look at the rabbit, its eye sockets beginning to glow a similar shade of that of its companions. A cascade of insects began to pour from its throat, flying hastily towards the pair.
Right, gotta focus. Be back in a second, kid.
With a knife in one hand and seemingly nothing in the other, Eli watched as the cloaked figure dashed towards the enemy without wasting another second. But what was he planning to do with just a knife? Was Osiris really that skilled? Just before the two collided, a bright flash of orange light cut through the night air. Eli recognized it as the same he'd seen through his closed eyes just moments before. Flames cascaded through the air, an empty hand of the man, scorching the butterflies out of the air and out of his way, their blue glow reduced to twinkling red embers. Eli couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't recall any mention of a hero having the ability to summon flames. glint of metal on Osiris' back drew his gaze to the canister attached there, likely the source of what was fueling the fire. While the insects' corpses dropped to the ground and turned to ash from the spray, the cloaked figure was gaining ground towards the swarm. That cry from earlier resounded again, more primal and ear-piercing. I could tell it was losing and it wasn't happy. Another cloud of butterflies poured from the hole in its throat, though this time the creatures were much smaller than before. Although it was hard to tell from this distance, Eli could have sworn that pieces of his own flesh seemed to be turning into those same butterflies as the bone beneath it grew more pronounced, accompanying holes in the skin that hadn't been there moments earlier. The new batch swarmed to Osiris, beginning to fall victim to the same fate as their predecessors. However, they'd begun to learn from their mistakes, a portion of them flying out of the way and diving towards the opposite exposed side. They never made contact, though, as the blade danced through the air and sliced through their minuscule forms. With fire in one hand and a dagger in the other, the butterflies only succeeded in slowing his progress for the moment as they fell, their burned bodies cluttering the ground below. The swarm was dissipating fast, and the rabbit was looking angrier than ever. His body panted as if it were gearing up for another shriek, one that never came. All that Eli could see was a brief reflection of light through the air before a gurgle came from the rabbit. Something was protruding from its throat now, an object that his eyes tracked back to the now empty hand of Osiris. The butterflies seemed to stop in the air as well, the connected minds of all the beings all processing what had just happened. That short moment of hesitation was all the hero needed to close the remaining distance and set the main body alight. The sound was horrible, a high-pitched gurgle of pain as it flailed in the flames, trying desperately to escape. Were it not for the knife lodged in its neck, Eli was sure the shrieks would have been even more haunting in the night air. The few remaining butterflies descended clumsily on Osiris, attempting to stop the stream of flame, their blue glow dimming as the movement of the rabbit slowed. Silently, the cloaked figure stood over the burning body. As the now dull insects dropped from the air, Eli watched as his mouth muttered something silently. After a moment he turned, walking back to the boy with a sense of purpose in his step.
Sorry you had to, witness all that. Even now, that kind of thing still messes with me.
The man let out a quiet "damn it" under his breath, but Eli still heard it.
Are you okay? You're not injured anywhere, are you?
Osiris reaches out a hand towards him to check, but the boy flinched away. Eli had wanted to trust the butterfly man, and that had ended badly. Even if this stranger really was Osiris, could he be trusted? The fight just now was impressive, but that only served to prove he was dangerous. There really was something to stranger danger after all.
Hey now, it's all right. I'm not going to hurt you, kid.
His hand still extended, the cloaked figure crouched down as he was now at eye level with the boy.
I just want to help.
Eli's hand began to reach toward Osiris and paused, still unsure if this was the right course of action. Trust him. Eli's head spun around, trying to find the source of his mother's voice. Where was she? That was her, he knew it. Trust him. There it was, her voice again. This time, when she said it though, he realized it came from the same place as earlier. In his head. It wasn't like his thoughts though. He knew the difference between those and this. This was like someone else was speaking inside his brain. Trust him. Eli still wasn't sure what to do, but he knew he could trust his mother. She had only ever done things for him, and he listened to her. They'd definitely see each other again soon. So the boy turned his attention back to the man, only to find him scanning the area rapidly.
What was it, kid? What did you hear?
The man brought his gaze back towards Eli, a concerned and questioning look in his eye. It took a moment for him to find his voice. I trust you. Osiris paused at that, before letting out a laugh. It was hearty and deep, something that made the boy feel safe.
I should hope so. I just saved your life.
He brought his hand down and ruffled the boy's head fur.
I'm glad to hear it, bud. Now, why don't you tell me your name? I can't just keep calling you nicknames after all.
Eli shifted into a cross-legged position, getting himself more comfortable. I'm Eli. Pleasure to meet you. The man relaxed at that, his stance taking a welcoming and open demeanor.
Eli, huh? A strong name for a strong boy. Very polite, too. Your parents taught you well.
At the mention of them, Eli's expression soured as tears sprang to his eyes. He still didn't know what happened to them. Were they okay? Were they safe? He knew neither of these were likely the answer, but he had to believe they might be. He had to stay strong for them. Meanwhile, Osiris cringed at the realization of the impact of his words.
Shit. I'm sorry, kid. I didn't mean to upset you.
His voice changed to a whisper as he muttered under his breath again.
Man, I wish I was better with kids right now.
He paused, trying to think of something to say that could help.
Oh, I never introduced myself.
I know. Eli interrupted him between sniffles. You're Osiris, right? There was confusion in his voice as the man responded.
Osiris? Oh, the hero from those old stories. Sorry, kid, but...
He looked towards the boy, seeing the desperation in his eyes.
You guessed it! That's me, all right. Glad to know I still have fans nowadays.
Eli noticeably cheered up at that, causing the man to relax.
Now, how can I help you, Eli?
There was a silence as the boy pondered what the next step was. Should they go back and look for his parents, or was it better to wait here? They told him when he was younger that if he ever got lost, the best thing to do was to stay put. Though right now, if he wanted to be somewhere that didn't smell this badly... Osiris stepped in, seeing the boy's hesitation.
I'll tell you what, kid. I'm getting a bit tired and could definitely use some good rest. How about I bring you back to my camp? We can stay there for the night, and you can have some time to sleep and think. How does that sound?
Eli smiled softly and nodded, brushing the dirt off himself as he stood up and reached for Osiris's hand to hold as they walked. Instead, the man hoisted the boy onto his back so he wouldn't have to walk. Resting there, the boy felt safer than he had in a while and began to drift off. Under the hood, the man smiled gently to himself.
Sweet dreams, Eli.
With that, the two set off into the ruined city, accompanied only by the stars shining from the cloudless sky above. Okay, I'm really sorry, guys, but I'm still a bit sick. I'm going to have to cut this one a little bit short. Yeah, my throat is just not liking this right now. So I'm going to have to keep recording another one. But man, did this take a wild turn. I was not expecting this, but ooh, we got a hero with a flamethrower. And I am sure I'm butchering that name, but I like him. I like him a lot. So this has been Fritz-Ay Says, and I will see you next time. Ciao.